This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Sai. Sefer Daniel, Perek Yud Aleph, Pasuk Chaf Gimel. I must admit, Chaf Gimel, Chaf Dalet. I must admit that of all the Nevi'im that I've learned, this is not from amongst the easier topics, and the Psukim are
easier than Yeshayahu.
Very difficult. But we're going to try to plow through this. And according to some of the Mefarshim, the upcoming Psukim, Chaf Daled, the upcoming Psukim speak about the alliance that was made between Klal Yisrael and Rome. Until now, we've been discussing the various politics of the end of the Greek Empire, Antiochus, and Antiochus' sister, who was who? Cleopatra, and how after Cleopatra dies, or during her lifetime, Antiochus uses it as an excuse to try to get into to Egypt. But now we're going to sort of, according to some Mefarshim, we're continuing with the end of the Greek Empire, and according to others, we're moving into the Roman Empire. Now, we're going to read a few psukim, then I want to show you the Gemara in Masechta Avodah Zarah about this alliance between Rome and Israel. Okay, take a look in Pasuk Chaf Daled, B'shalva, in tranquility, Uv'mishmanei Medina, and in the fat, in the luscious part of the country, Yava, he will come.
Wait a second, I'm sorry.
Yud Aleph Chaf Daled.
Yesh Mefazir.
No.
Yud Aleph Chaf Daled.
Chapter 11.
That's right.
Verse 24.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm looking in the wrong place.
B'shalva v'mishmanei Medina Yavai. In tranquility and in the lush of the land he will come. V'yasan, he will do asher lo yasu avosav, that which his fathers have not done. V'avois avosav, and his fathers' fathers. In other words, some Mefarshim learn that this is a reference to Antiochus, and Antiochus will be able to accomplish that which his forefathers.
Which Antiochus was this? There are 5 of them.
Which one? One of them.
They don't know.
We know exactly which one is debatable. To say which one, different Mefarshim learn different ones. Presumably, this is referring to Antiochus the 4th. Okay?
Not the 5th.
No, not the 5th. Antiochus the 4th. And Antiochus the 4th will be able to do what his forefathers had not been able to do, and that is to penetrate the fortifications at the border between Egypt and Asia.
Egypt and where?
Egypt and Asia. Okay, I guess from the Middle East that means. Biza, he will spread. Biza v'shal archush lahem yivtzar. He will spread among them booty and spoils, u'rechush and wealth. Yivtzar he will spread. V'yam yivtzarim, and against fortresses, yechashev machshavoysav v'yares. He will concentrate his thoughts until the end of time, until the time. In other words, he will give spoils. He will spread the booty and the spoils among everyone, to those who cooperate with him. And against the fortresses, he will concentrate his thoughts, which means that Antiochus had plans. He was scheming to conquer Egypt's fortresses, but he didn't think it was the opportune time to attack, and he waited for the most opportune time. Pasuk Chaf Hey.
Is this Antiochus the guy that went crazy?
No. V'yayer koichai. He will arouse his strength, ulavavai, and his heart, al melech hanegev, against the king of the south. That's referring to Egypt. Now Rashi already from Pasuk Chaf Gimel was learning that this is talking about the alliance that Klal Yisrael made with Rome. And this is talking about Rome's expansion to the land surrounding Eretz Yisrael, Edom and Moav and Ammon. And Rashi quotes the Sefer Yosifon. But according to other Mefarshim, this still refers to Antiochus. And we'll see in the Gemara about that that alliance between the Jewish people and Rome. V'yoyer koichai, he will arouse his strength. Ulavava, in his heart, al melech hanegev, against the king of the south. B'chayo gado, with a great army. Umelech hanegev, and the king of the south, Yisgar el Amochama, will be provoked to war, B'chayo Gadol, with a powerful army. Va'atzum ad ma'od, very strong. V'layamod, but he will not withstand, Ki yachshavu alav machshavos, because they will devise plans against him. Now what is this talking about? Well, some of Parshim learn that Antiochus returns to Egypt after the death of Cleopatra.
Cleopatra was his sister.
But Cleopatra ended up marrying one of the Talmais. So he, at first, used that marriage as a pretext to try to have an in the country. The people of Alexandria resisted Antiochus. They did not want him to attack. They did not want to give him entrance. So he comes against the king of the south. The king of the south at that time...
Is southern Egypt as opposed to northern Egypt?
No, Egypt as opposed to Asia.
But he had Cleopatra was the queen, Darton. Why would
Yeah, but Cleopatra was the queen of Egypt. So her alliance was to Egypt and not her brother.
Really?
Now, who was the king of Egypt at the time? Either Talmai the 6th, who was Talmai Philometer, or Talmai the 7th, Euergetus. Right? And in that case, Antiochus is approaching Egypt. Now, according to Rashi, this refers to the Roman campaign against Egypt in the times of the Chashmonaim. Pasuk Chavav. We're just going to read some psukim, and then I'll give you some more background. Va'oichle pas bagoi. Those who eat his food, yishberuhu, will break him. V'cheiloi yishtaif. V'naflu chalolim rabim. He will sweep away his army, and many corpses will fall. What is this talking about? The Egyptian army will be so overwhelmed that they'll be swept away by Antiochus like a flood. Okay, now according to Rashi, this refers to the Romans sweeping away the Egyptians. Pasuk Chav Zayin. Ushnehem hamalachim. And for the two kings, Levavam lemeira, their hearts will be to do harm. And at one table they will speak falsehood. But it will not succeed. Because there is an end for the allotted time. Now what does this mean? So it's brought down over here that Antiochus had the good fortune to capture Talmai the 6th alive. He was the heir to the throne. And under the guise of being a protect, now Talmai the 6th was Antiochus' nephew, because he's Cleopatra's son. So under the guise of a protective uncle, he came into the country as if he wanted to install this kid as the next king. The Alexandrians...
What was he going to do? Kill the kid's father?
No, the kid's father, I don't know if he was around, but the Alexandrians didn't like what Antiochus was getting involved in acting under this guise of trying to protect his nephew. So Alexandrians crowned the younger brother, Talmai the 7th, and meanwhile Antiochus besieged the city, maintaining that if the Alexandrians would recognize the older Talmai, he would back off. Now what Antiochus had in mind was to cause some kind of civil war between the two Talmais, and then he would take over the country. But he would not succeed, because the two Talmais joined forces against their uncle. Now, what does it mean? Ki oid ket slamoyed? The end was coming to the time allotted for Antiochus' kingship. Okay, now according to Rashi, Rashi learns this completely different. Rashi learns that we're not talking about Antiochus over here. According to Rashi, the two kings here are not Talmai the 6th and Talmai the 7th, but instead this refers to two brothers, and their names were Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. Hyrcanus was the Chashmonai king, and Aristobulus was his brother. And in order to succeed in struggling with Aristobulus, Hyrcanus commissioned the help of the Romans. The Roman general's name was Pompeius,
Pompey.
and
Named Caesar.
even though he at this time was not the king, but for all practical purposes, as general, he represented the forces of Rome.
Right.
So let's read Rashi inside. Rashi in Pasuk Chav Zayin says, "Ushneim hamalachim sar Romim." The general of the Romans, Unegid Habris, and the prince of the covenant, Ha'amar Lamala, that was said above, who Hyrcanus was Hyrcanus she'yischaber le'ezrasai. He tried to align for his help, Kedei she'yazer gamhu al Aristobulus achav hamelech b'Yerushalayim. Aristobulus was ruling over Jerusalem, and Hyrcanus wanted the Roman help to fend off his brother Aristobulus.
Fend off or overtake him.
Yeah, right, correct, to overtake him. And the Romans were only too happy to go into Israel and attack Jerusalem. That's what the pasuk says, Lavavam l'meira, their heart was evil on the people of Yehuda. And even though they sat at one table, who's they? The Romans and Hyrcanus. But nevertheless, they spoke falsehood, and it will not be successful. In other words, the Jewish alliance was not successful with Rome, because ultimately the Romans, after we took them in, they took over the country. Says Rashi, Ki oid ketz samayid hachorban. There was still time. In other words, v'loy sitzlach, Rashi says, sheyismasu Yisrael hashchasa ba'osin hayamim. Klal Yisrael will be given over to destruction in those days. Ki oid ketz samayid hachorban lamalos shavuim shishim ushnayim ha'amrim b'sefer zeh. There was still 62 years of 7-year periods that the Churban would come. In other words,
62 7-year cycles.
Yeah, how long is that?
434.
What?
434.
Yeah, so the 434 had not been over yet.
No, it doesn't mean there's 434 to go. It means at the end of the 434.
Correct. And when did that happen? That will happen in the days of Agrifas, Ben Agrifas, from the children of Hordis. Okay? So I want to give out a sheet now, just to get an idea about the history of when the Roman Empire ascended and when it overtook Yerushalayim. At what point was the covenant? How long did the Romans keep the covenant with the Jewish people? Okay? Now, yeah, in other words, the Jewish people commissioned the Romans to help them. I want to know how long that covenant lasted for?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Ren is here, which I don't think you would really want to have a look at. Look at the way the sheet looks. Here.
What can we do?
What?
Okay. Let's see 2 more psukim here. Let's see 2 more psukim.
We need
You have to look at it upside down.
2 more sheets. Two more sheets. Rabbi, you have 2 more sheets?
Yeah, you don't have enough. Oh yeah, sure.
I get it.
Okay. Let's just see 2 more psukim. V'yashoy v'artzoi, he will return to his land b'chush gadol, with great wealth. Now, if you learn this is talking about Antiochus, it means during the siege of Alexandria, Antiochus returned to Syria. And the pasuk continues, Ulavavai abris kodesh. His heart is set against the holy covenant. V'yasa, he will achieve. V'shav la'artza, he will return to his land. What does this mean? What does it mean his heart is against the covenant of sanctity? The Jewish nation, which is identified with its covenant with God, so the heart of Antiochus was against the Jewish people. It's brought down over here that before Antiochus' campaign against Egypt, there was turmoil in Jerusalem regarding the office of the Kohen Gadol. In Josephus, now if you want to look it up, it's in Josephus, A-N-T, dot. You know what that stands for?
Interior?
Antiquities, I believe. Antiquities 1251. So if you're going to go look it up. In Josephus, Antiquities 1251, it says like this. When Chonyo, who later changed his name to Onias, we learned in the Gemara Megillah about the Beis Chonyo, which is a house of Avodah Zarah. So the Kohen Gadol died, his son was too young to succeed him. His brother Yeshua then changed his name to Jason, was appointed to the post. The king was very angry at Jason, so he appointed the younger brother, strangely also named Chonio. And that Chonio changed his name to Menelos. Now, when Antiochus was in Egypt waging war, a rumor spread that the king had died. So Jason, who had been removed by Antiochus, seized the opportunity to return and take the reign in Jerusalem. Antiochus came back to Yerushalayim and squelched Jason. That's how some learn. But Rashi learns differently. Rashi learns this is talking about the Roman siege against Jerusalem, against Yerushalayim, Pasuk Chavtes. Rashi in Pasuk Chavches, V'yasha melech haRomi le'artzai. The Roman king will return from Egypt, Me'al melech haNegev rechush gadol, u'levavai abris kodesh. And now that Rome overtook Egypt, Rome is having the machshava, you know what, let's break the covenant with Eretz Yisrael, and let's attack Eretz Yisrael. And Pasuk Chavtes, Lamoyed, at the appointed time, Yashuv, they will return, Ubaba Negev, and come to the south, Velosia, Karishaina, Vichlachreina. And it will not be like in the beginning and the end. What does this mean? So some learn that Antiochus heard about his nephew, Talmai the sixth. Okay? That Talmai the sixth had betrayed him and joined forces with the younger brother, Talmai the seventh. So Antiochus returns to Egypt with a tremendous army. And then the pasuk says, it won't be like the first and like the last. Even though initially Antiochus succeeded in subjugating Egypt, but it won't be like he always did. In other words, the Malbim explains, he will not come like he did the first time. He will only be able to take part of Mitzrayim.
What does Yachwana mean?
At which point, the Malbim learns, now this is talking about the Greek Empire, the Talmais in Egypt then solicited the help of the Romans against the Greeks. It says in the Malbim, so the Malbim says, Shalchal Ansrei Mitzrayim Lavakish Ezem in HaSenet Beroma. They sought out the help of the Romans, and they sent a messenger to return quickly to their land, and the Romans joined forces with the Greeks. Now, but according to Rashi, this refers to later on in the Roman occupation. Let's just see Rashi. Lamoyed liachar zman velosia habia hazois mitzlachas korishayna.
This is the story with Monticello that he defeats.
Well, this is talking about according to Rashi, this is talking about after the story of Hanukkah. This is talking about, now the pasuk says that it won't be like the first and like the last. This coming of the Romans will not be successful like the first time, that the northern king was successful over the southern. Vikach Roina. This second time also will not be like this time, because the second time they came with great wealth. Okay? This is, hold on to the place, remember up to Pasuk Lamed. Okay? And I want you to take a look at the Ramban turn over your sheets first to number 2. Vayechi Yaakov v'Eretz Mitzrayim Sheva Esrei Shana. Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim 17 years. Kfar Huskarti. Says Ramban, I've already mentioned earlier. Ki redes Yaakov leMitzrayim hu galuseinu hayoim biyad hachaya haravius. Yaakov's descent to Mitzrayim was the pre-enactment, was the Masayava, was the symbolism, was the paradigm of our fourth exile in the fourth monster. Who's the fourth monster? Rome. Now, what the Ramban goes on to explain is 6 parallels between Yaakov going down to Mitzrayim and our descent into the Roman Galus today. What are they? Romi Harsha. Number 1.
You're in the fourth Galus today?
Yeah. Yes. Edom. Why? Number 1. Ki b'nei Yaakov heim atzmam sibavu riditam sham b'mechiras Yosef achia. If we were to ask, how did Yaakov and his family end up going to Mitzrayim? Did the Mitzrim come and capture us? Or did we bring it upon ourselves because we sold our brother to Egypt? We brought it upon ourselves. We took our brother, our flesh and blood, we sold him down to that country. We then had to go find him. So if you want to know how did it happen, we brought it on ourselves, right? Ki b'nei Yaakov heim atzmam sibavu ridatam sham b'mechiras Yosef achim. The b'nei Yaakov caused that we should go down because of the sale of Yosef.
Wait a minute, I have a question about that. We know the story that the brothers sold Yosef. Fine. But the reason that they went down to Mitzrayim in the first place because of Rav Hayabaras.
Who? Which brother? The brothers?
The brothers.
Okay, we're getting good.
Wait. Now, the fact that Yosef was there and he was the second in command, that doesn't mean that the brothers had to live there. If they would have discovered him, they could have returned with that food and they could have returned to Eretz Israel. So it was they who, in my mind, chose of their own to decide to stay there because Yosef made them a wonderful
but in other words, it's not the Egyptians didn't come conquer Eretz Israel and we were subjugated. We were searching for Yosef. Okay, A. B, once we found him, we had to stay there because we needed the food.
Taking the food home. They took the food home the first time.
That was the arrangement. That was Yosef's the king. That was the arrangement, right? So number one, we brought on ourselves. Number two, the Yaakov Yarad Sham Ibnei Harav. Yaakov went down there because of the famine. Number three, Yaakov figured, we have an inn in the palace. We have our brothers in the palace. We have a connection that could protect us. He thought to be saved through his son in the house of the one who loves his son. Ki Paro oheves Yosef uchu ben lo. Paro loved Yosef. Yosef was like his son. Number four, v'hayu sfurim lalos misham kechlos harav me'as Canaan. They figured they would leave Mitzrayim when the famine is over, like the pasuk says, Lagur ba'aretz banu. We only came to sojourn in the land. Yaakov
was quite aware of the 400 years that we had to spend in Mitzrayim. He knew Avraham Avinu.
But remember, the 400 years
from the time of Yitzchak.
Right, that means you could still be in Eretz Yisrael and the stopwatch hasn't stopped. So he figured he'll go to Mitzrayim. Maybe the Geula hadn't come, but we would, be wandering Israel for maybe another 200 years. But they figured they wouldn't be in Canaan for so long. V'hinei lo yalu, they never left. Aval orach aleim ha'golos. We were there, and we were there, and we were there. Did Yaakov ever leave Mitzrayim? No, he died in Mitzrayim. What left Mitzrayim? His bones left Mitzrayim. Umeisham v'yalu atzmoisav, his bones left. The bones of Yaakov and his sons. Who ended up bringing out Yaakov's bones? Ziknei Paroi, V'sarav Heluhu. V'asu Amai Avel Kaved. And the people mourned Yaakov greatly. So number one, we went down there on our own accord. Number two, because of famine. Number three, we weren't planning on staying. Number four, we thought we had an inn because of Yosef. Number five, we never left. Number six, our dry bones were left Mitzrayim, and seven, when we left, the nation mourned bitterly. Says Ramban, all these things will happen in this galus. What are they? Unbelievable. He says, V'chein anachnu. Likewise us, Imromi ve'edom. How did we end up under Roman subjugation? You think the Romans... We invited them. You think the Romans didn't come and conquer Eretz Yisrael? We made a treaty with them. We're going to see Agrifas made a treaty, or according to Rashi, Hyrcanus made a treaty. But we made a treaty with them.
With Mitzrayim, the Mitzrayim invited the Jews. Here, it's the Jews who invited the Romans.
Okay, but simply put, according to Ramban, the way we invited them is we went there. Okay, we'll see. Let's see. He says, Achinu hesibainu biyasenu biyadam. Our brothers caused our coming into their hands. Kikarsu bris imha Romium. We signed a treaty with the Romans. We're going to learn that this treaty was signed, presumably, at the beginning of the Hashmonaim dynasty. Very possibly, what allowed the Hashmonaim to vanquish the Greeks, or what allowed the Romans to vanquish the Greeks, was that alliance between Klal Yisrael and Rome. The Agrifas Hamelech, Agrifas, the king, Ha'achor, and the Bayesheni, the last king of the second temple, Barach Aleim Le'ezra, he ran to them. Agrifas ran to them. Now, this presumably is a different alliance that I'm mentioning before. There was an alliance in the beginning of the Chashmonai dynasty, but it seems like there was another alliance in the times of Agrifas. Agrifas was the last king of the second Beis Hamikdash. And what ultimately brought down Yerushalayim in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, we learn in Gittin and the Sugi of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. But what was the physical cause? There was famine in the city, right? And we really had enough supplies, but then the Baryonim burnt it down. And we figured, okay, we'll go to Rome, we'll be in Galus, eventually we'll come out, but it just got longer and longer and longer. We don't know when it's going to end.
There's a more in Sanhedrin.
Yeah.
It brings down that Cheskiyahu was the beginning of the, when he invited Sanherib.
Okay, so
that was
first Beis Hamikdash, right? And he even gave Sancherib a gift of the doors of the
doors of the that's where it started.
So that's always not a good idea to join forces with the.
Because the Chachamim were
they didn't agree, right? The Chachamim did not agree with that alliance. So here in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, this alliance with Rome brought our downfall. Now, so you'll say we're in the Galus. Are we going to come out? We ain't coming out alive. What does that mean? What if Mashiach comes? No. Right now we're dead. Right now. The state of the Jewish people right now, in the year 5773, it's like we're dead. V'anachnu by kemesim.
Why?
We are like dead.
Why?
Oyimrim, we say, Yavshu atzmaiseinu, our bones have dried. Nigzarnu lanu. We're doomed. What does this mean? The Vilna Gaon writes in the introduction to the Vilna Gaon writes in his commentary to the Safra D'Tzniusa, which is a Kabbalistic work. He writes that when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, it's like we died. Spiritually, it's like we died. But at least we still had the great academies. We had the great yeshivas, Surah, Pampadusa, Neherda. That was like, he said, at least then, the body was still intact. At least then the body was intact. Once we lost the academies in Bavel, it's like the flesh began to rot. But at least we had bones. He said, but then when the Go'inim and so forth, and the later Chachamim passed away, even the bones began to disintegrate. And now what are we, says the Gra? Now we are like Tarvad Rekev. We're corpse dust.
Even though we have so much Chabatz's Torah all around the world,
imagine,
like you never had before.
He said, compared to what we had, compared to the Ruchnius that we once had, we're like Tarvad Rekev, we're like corpse dust.
Yeah, but
and the Gra says,
all the Ruchnius, you had all these problems with Avodah Zarah and Yitzin Eschinam and.
Look, Rabbi, today we don't. We have Rav Moshe Feinsteins, we have Rav Aaron Kotler's, we have Gedolim of that stature. We have Vilna Gaons, we have Noida Behudas. We have nothing. Comparative, relatively speaking, we're like corpse dust. And the Vilna Gaon says like this, when we say in Kabbalah Shabbos, Hisna'ari me afar kumi, so we always translate it to mean, shake me off from the dust where I am. I've fallen into the dust, shake me off from the dust. The Gra says it doesn't mean shake me off from the dust where I am. Shake me off from the dust that I am. I am dust. So that's what the Ramban is saying.
Depressing. I mean,
this ain't no glue. This ain't no rosy look. And says the Ramban, the same way we left Mitzrayim bones, Mashiach is going to come to a bunch of bones. But the same way when Yaakov was removed from Mitzrayim, they mourned. When Mashiach comes, and the Goyim see our kavod and our stature and how great we are, right? Chazal say, L'asad Lavai, 70 people, right? 70 Umay Sa'olam will grab a hold, right? 10 people from each of the Umay Sa'olam will grab a hold of one corner of the tzitzis. And they're going to say, teach me the truth. So, right? You hear this prophecy? It says 10 people from each nation will grab a hold of the knaf of your beged and say, teach me the truth. So how many nations are there? 70. 700 to just one corner. That means every Jew will be an ambassador to 2,800 Goyim. So when the Goyim see our covet, Lasid Lavai,
it can't be an ambassador one Jew to the other. We're going to be an ambassador to 2,800 Goyim.
Listen to it. And what are the Goyim going to do?
Management training.
What are the Goyim going to do when they see our covet? They're going to be mourning. They're going to be mourning our greatness. So this is what we're learning. So that the Ramban learns that the galus that we're in today, we brought upon ourselves through our alliance with Rome. Now let's learn a little bit about this alliance. This is in Gemara, but we won't be able to see the whole thing today. But if someone could mark off, we're up to Pasuk Lamed, and then we'll start this Gemara, and we'll continue it next time. Okay. This is a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Ches Amid Beis, going on to Tes Amid Aleph. It says that one of the Eidehem of the Goyim, one of the Goyish holidays, is what we call Kartisim. My Kartisim, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Yom Shatav Sabai Roimi Malchus. It's the Yom that the Romans grabbed sovereignty. The Gemara asks, that's the holiday, the day that the Romans took Melucha? But obviously Kartisim is different than that, because we learned in a Brisa that these are two separate independent days. Tanya Kartisim v'yom shetafsa b'roimi Malchus. We learned one day is the day of Kartisim, and one is the day they took Malchus. Rav Yosef shtei tfisos tafsa roimi. Rome grabbed two
2 days where they grabbed power in different parts of the world.
2 times, correct. Bimei Yavanim, Achas bimei Cleopatra, Malchus of Yachas Shetafs bimei Yavanim. One they took from the Greeks, and one they took from Cleopatra. I believe they took from the Greeks first, and later on they took from Egypt. They expanded to Egypt in the times of Cleopatra. Techiasi, Rav Dimi, Amar. When Rav Dimi came, he said, Tlasen utrain karavi avdu ramai bahadi Yavani. The Romans waged 32 wars with the Greeks. They could not prevail. They can't overcome those Greeks. Until they joined up Klal Yisrael with them. In other words, the Romans were unsuccessful until they joined forces with the Jews.
The Jewish soldiers actually fought with the Roman soldiers against the Greeks?
I don't know if it means they actually, they fought on the same battle lines, but politically they made an alliance with the Jews.
And how did that enable the Romans, who couldn't overcome the Greeks before, to overcome that? What power did the...
So the Gemara says they used a philosophical argument. Well, let's take a look. The Gemara says, what was the alliance? They said, "V'hachi asnu b'hadar." This is the alliance they made. Iminan malki, iminaychu hafrachi. If we'll be the kings, you'll be the governors. Iminaychu malki. If we'll be the kings, minan hafrachi. Iminaychu malki. If you'll be the kings, minan hafrachi. We'll be the governors. In other words, we're going to have this alliance. One of us will be first in power. The other one will be second. V'shalchu lahu ramoi liyavani. And the Romans then sent to the Greeks, Adho idna avidna bikrava. Until now, our approach was through war. Hashta navid bedina. Now we will take over your country legally. How? They said like this: Margolis v'yaven taiva ezamehen yasa basis l'chaverai. If you have a diamond and a precious stone, which one should be the setting for his friend? Should the diamond be the setting, or the precious stone be the setting? Shalchulahu. The Greeks sent back, Margolis avantava. The diamond should be the setting for the precious stone. They then sent back, Even toiva v'inach, ezem yasa basus chaveroi. Let's say you have a precious stone, but then you have a carbuncle, which is a very, very precious stone. Which one should be a setting for its friend? Ezem yasa basus chaveroi. Even toiva l'inach. The precious stone should be the setting for the carbuncle. Inach v'sefer Torah. But if you have a carbuncle and the Holy Torah, Ezem Yasabas Chaverai. So they said, what do you mean? Inach l'Sefer Torah. The carbuncle should be the setting for the Torah. So the Romans said, we have the Sefer Torah. We have the Jews. So you need to be the setting. You need to be subject to us. Imkain shalchu, they send Imkain anan sefer Torah gavan. We have the Torah. V'Yisrael bahadan, the Jews are with us. Kafu lahu esrin v'shis shnin. Kafu lahu, excuse me. So Greece then became subject to Rome. Now it's hard to believe that a world power would be persuaded by a Gemara logic that, oh yeah, I think you should just, tie your hands behind your back and come bow down to us because we have the Jews. The Greeks were subjugating the Jews. So this had to have a deeper meaning. But ultimately, however it happened,
they had this philosophical discussion.
Somehow,
at the end, the Greeks
ceded to the Romans.
The Romans to be the government, the power.
Yeah. Says the Gemara, Esvin v'shis shnin kamu lahu b'hamnasayu b'hadei Yisrael. For 26 years, the Romans kept their end of the bargain with the Jews, and they allowed this alliance to remain. They were trustworthy to each other. Mekan ve'elach. From that point on, ishtabdu b'hu.
So who was the power in Eretz Yisrael during these 26 years? The Jews?
Yeah, they were autonomous. Who was the king?
They didn't have to check what they were doing with Rome?
The king of Hashmonai.
Agrippas, perhaps. Or the Hashmonai king.
But he didn't do anything without checking with Rome. He was nothing more than a figurehead.
How many years was
No, so we're saying the Hashmonaim had a certain degree of autonomy for 26 years.
Okay, so they had the self-government, like Lahavdil of Palestinians in Ramallah. But it's not a real government. That anything they had to do to any serious consequence, they would have to check with the people in Rome.
Well, I don't know. I don't think the Hashmonai dynasty was subject to the Romans. It was an equal alliance. The Romans were just getting their feet wet. The Greek was the world power of the time. And Mr. Shem, next week we'll see further about this alliance, how long it lasted, and what ultimately happened to this alliance.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.